would be really poor form. That's not something that any of us want to see happening. Really, we should be moving forward as a society.
Donald Trump pulled America out of the Iran nuclear deal just to spite his predecessor, Barack Obama. That's according to leaked memos from Britain's former ambassador to Washington. The Mail on Sunday has published another batch of Kim Darroch's cables, despite police saying doing so might be breaking the law. And New Orleans appears to have escaped the worst from a weakened tropical storm Barry. Its flood defences were expecting their biggest test since Hurricane Katrina 14 years ago. However, the storm is moving so slowly, city officials warn its effects may be prolonged. That's all for now. More in an hour.
News Talk Weather.
Today will be a dry and sunny day with just a few clouds forming over the eastern half of the country. Very warm with top temperatures of 20 to 25 degrees. And now up to date on News Talk.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Avantcard. Powered by MasterCard.
Now then, you're very welcome back. So we're going to review the Sunday Papers. We are still on the radio. We're also on all our social channels. So if you're watching on Facebook or Periscope or our Twitter account or offtheball.com, then you're very welcome as well. With me in studio, as you'll see, we have Bernard Jackman and we have John Greene as well, sports editor with the Sunday Independent. Fellas, thanks very much for coming in. Appreciate it. You're welcome. I'll run you through the back pages first. Sunday Times I have here. Rebels repelled. This is the action at Croke Park yesterday. Conor Callaghan, the main picture, getting away from Thomas Clancy. Beneath that, FAI warned on tickets deal is Paul Rowan there with the story. And Owen Morgan set for Day of Destiny, the extraordinary prospect of an Irishman captaining England to a World Cup win today at Lord's. Back page of the Sun then. Rebellion crushed, a similar theme as you might imagine, but margin of victory flatters champions, which it certainly did. Dublin 5-18, Cork 1-17, a 13-point gap, but Cork were far better than that suggests. Then we have the Star. Iconic, this is Morgan. If we win today, we will be heroes forever. Picture of Owen Morgan on the back page of the Star. Sunday Mirror. Golden Generation. Blues given super challenge by Cork, but come up with the answers yet again. Dublin 5-18, Cork 1-17 on the back page of the Mirror. And if you missed it already this morning, Diarmuid Connolly is back training with the Dubs. Jim Gavin slipped that in to a post-match debrief with the Dubs TV official account. Sunday World, Pogba on United banned list. Solskjaer considering want-away star as new Old Trafford captain. So when we say banned, radio listeners, we don't mean he's going to be banned. It means Solskjaer thinks he might be captain material for the season ahead, Paul Pogba. The Mail on Sunday then. Picture of Kieran Kilkenny, 5-alive-0. Brilliant Dubs quash brave Rebels resistance with an awesome display of goal scoring. And then we might touch on this later on, a picture of 89-year-old Peter Allis. 89-year-old Peter Allis. He's interviewed inside with Philip Quinn. Portrush's Open return evokes fond memories for iconic broadcaster. One of the amazing stats in that piece, actually, is that Peter Allis, since World War II, has played a round of golf with every single winner of the Open since 1945 and counting, which is quite amazing. Dubs turn up heat. Back page of the Sunday Indo, Joe Brawley writing there about Dublin's 5-18 to 1-17 win over Cork. And beneath that, John Greene, we'll get to this, another FAI story. This is McSharry warns against FAI rushed reforms. This being the general sense that the FAI, in trying to pass every single one of the reforms in the recommendations put forward a couple of weeks ago, are rushing things too quickly. And people are wondering why, but they seem to be trying to press ahead anyway. We'll come to that, but it's Mark McSharry, the TD, who's amongst those. There's a few others expressing concerns about the way the FAI are trying to sort everything out before, in fact, the 4 or 5 outstanding reports come through as well, which is probably part of it. Might start with the Dubs. They're kind of everywhere here. Bernard, you just made the observation from watching last night, even when Cork were gung-ho and going for it and had the better of things for different chunks, there's just not even a hint of panic in the Dublin team.
Yeah, I thought they were very impressive because Cork went out and played a really aggressive attacking style of football and went 5 points up, and then Dublin seemed to be completely out of sync for that first 10-15 minutes, but then they just clicked into gear, and their ability to capitalise on possession and turn it into scores for me was phenomenal, and it's just hard to see how anyone could get close to them really. And just down the bench, bringing fellas off the bench, their unselfishness, their athleticism, the squad depth, and their work rate is just it was incredible, and like the Meath Leinster final obviously probably ended up similar type scoreline in terms of dominance for Dublin, but I thought last night they were in more of a game, and they just passed with flying colours, and you wonder, they don't even seem to get any complacency or overconfidence. It's just like a machine.
John?
Yeah, look, it's funny, I don't necessarily think that the scoreline flattered them. I mean, the scoreline was what it was, and they pulled away in the end. But, if Joe Brawley's stats that he has for us here, that Dublin scored 2-9 in the first half, and that was out of a possible 2-10 that they could have scored. So they just missed one chance that they created. By the final whistle, he says they had managed to score 5-13 from play from a possible 6-16 in chances created.
Yeah.
It's a level of, and Joe makes the point, and it's been made several times about this Dublin team, it's a level of efficiency that we've never seen anything like in Gaelic games before.
And is he shouting this down to you, down the phone to you at full time
No,
during an ad break of the RTE coverage?
Joe was on air last night, and as soon as he was off air, he started work on it, and certainly by 9:25 he'd filed his piece.
It's good going.
It is good going, yeah.
Yeah, for a man whose first job.
He wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. He says if Barcelona had conjured that third goal, it would have a billion hits on YouTube, all dummies and pretense and support play, until the bewildered Cork defence were scratching their heads and their keeper was retrieving the ball from the net. Kieran Whelan, who was with me in the RTE studio, and to be fair to him, he isn't a natural endorphin producer. He thought the Dubs were not that good and that Jim Gavin would be livid with the performance. Note to Kieran, and then in capitals, they won by 13 points. They scored 5-18. If any other team had put on this display, we'd be saying, geez, the Dubs have a serious competitor for the throne. And that was his sense on the TV yesterday as well, that we're looking for chinks here out of desperation and we're making them bigger chinks than they actually are, and he never had any sense that Dublin were in trouble in this game.
Yeah, I get the impression that some of the Dublin based or ex-Dublin players are nearly afraid to really credit them because of all this debate around splitting Dublin and resources and things like that, whereas if you just watch the performance, there's nothing wrong with actually saying, look, at this team are absolutely outstanding. I get that impression that there's a background obviously around the fact that the GAA or the football is not as competitive as it was, and we don't want to paint that illusion. But the reality is, I think you've just seen an unbelievably good squad who are on target for 5 in a row and maybe more.
Just as an interesting aside, Colin O'Rourke does a live piece from the other game yesterday, the Tyrone-Roscommon game, and in it he just has a line, and this was written before the Dublin game. He's talking about Roscommon scoring 13 points, and he says bravery and hard work and guts will only get you so far, and realistically, if you want to be considered to be serious in the Super 8, you need to be running up a score of around 117 to be in with a chance, which is exactly what Cork scored last night in Croke Park, and they lost by 13 points.
It's an interesting point actually, because Andy Moran of Mayo was on the show last year, and he made the point that in his mind he always has 20 points as the target to get near Dublin. Now, it's not a scientific thing or whatever, but when Mayo are playing Dublin, they're playing the scoreboard as well. It's like
when you hear a golfer talking about what he needs to shoot on a Sunday to be there or thereabouts. And I'm presuming it's the same
rugby,
for rugby. You've got a point. So like Joe Smith has got, when he's each opposition, he's got a points tally in his head, and if you're in and around that, you're going to be there or thereabouts.
Now,
I thought it was interesting.
It doesn't help when Dublin score 5-18.
No, but I thought what was interesting about, Joe, when you're in the same boat, so last night we're in the office and it's all very tight, and you need the game to finish when you think it's going to finish, and you need things to work out so that you can. When those 3 goals were going in towards the end of the game last night, and the picture on a few of the papers today of Kilkenny, of his face. I mean, the game's over. Look at his face after he scored. There was a sense of those 3 goals, and they went for them. They weren't just, usually with 2 of those 3 goals, you'd have seen a fist over the bar or a tap over the bar, because that's what they do. They just take the simple option. But 2 of the 3 goals was clearly sending a message. It was clear that there was a bit of a intent in them. Okay, you had your fun. Now it's back to this is it. This is us. This is who we are. And the pecking order is going to be restored. I really got that sense from them. When you look at the pictures of the celebrations of the goals, not typical of what you'd expect from Dublin.
No, for those of you just listening, you wouldn't say Kilkenny's... He's not smiling. He ain't blowing kisses. It's a determined...
It's have that.
Have that. It's a little aggressive kind of a thing. Yeah. It's like stick it to you. Brawley, by the way, bookends his piece nicely because he started with Liam Brady said on RTÉ Radio that when they reached half-time against the great Brazil team of 82, only 1-0 behind, the Irish team should have gone on a lap of honour. Draws the analogy with Cork, obviously the parallel with Cork last night. They must have felt like doing something similar. He does finish by saying, for the record, Brazil went on to beat Ireland in that game by 7-0. For Cork yesterday, a half-time lap of honour mightn't have been a bad idea. There was that sense. Meanwhile, Mayo are on the road today. They're in Killarney. Mick Foley is talking about the Mayo experience. John, you like this piece?
Yeah, it's a very good piece. I mean, we're all
Mayo fans.
We can't not have an opinion on Mayo at this point in time. But what they bring to the championship, what they've brought since, 2013, is it?
It's James Horne's first stint, yeah.
What they've brought has been extraordinary. And I was saying to you off air, I mean, has any group of supporters spent as much money following a team in the last... I mean, it's phenomenal. Like, when you decide to go from Mayo to a match pretty much anywhere in the country, the meter is running. You know, your fuel, your food, you know, they don't go... It's not daddy going off on his own. It's the whole car is loaded up and we're all off. And I think Mick tells a story about 3 couples with children as soon as it was obvious that they were going to be heading to Killarney last week, that organised babysitters and got the whole thing up and running, and everybody decamped down for the night down to Killarney for the match. And I see Mick is actually tweeting about the queues going into Killarney today, and it has that feeling. I was lucky enough last year to be in Clones for the Kerry Monaghan game, and it was a day like today, a beautiful day, and it was a real old style championship feel to it. And I think anyone who's in, even if the game itself isn't a classic, I think anybody who's there is going to be treated to a real enjoyable championship day. And Killarney is, I've experienced it myself, Killarney on a day like that for a championship game is a great place to be.
Yeah. Well, the other thing about Mayo, and the headline is Here Come Mayo, people from around the world feel a sense of pride about following the county. It is no longer just about the annual pursuit of an All-Ireland. The other thing about Mayo is they may not win every game, but it's always entertaining. Yeah,
so there's Mick talks to 3 supporters, Rob Murphy, John Gunnigan, and an American, Jim Zaldi, who's, I'd like to know more about him, who's just happened upon this whole Mayo thing and travelled over last weekend, especially for the Galway game, and then went back home again. So I don't know if he's back this weekend for the Kerry game. But one of them, Gunnigan, who does a Mayo blog, John Gunnigan, I think he sums up what we understand the Mayo experience to be now, when they, unlike a lot of other counties, they don't seem to get on the backs of their players. They don't seem to be, certainly not say the way that we've seen with Kerry fans or some in the past, being very hard to please. And he says that they've almost settled into this almost spiritual coexistence with the team. And he says people are more chilled out. We always had to win, but it's like we've gone beyond that. We'll win now if we're good enough. Everyone accepts we're competing with the best team of all time, and we made a damn good effort against them. But we've stopped beating ourselves up over not winning it. We may never win it. Which is a slightly different way of saying that we've given up. But we're more accepting now of where we are.
Well, I think they've reached a point where they're not letting the fact that they may not win the All-Ireland, this generation may not win the All-Ireland, they don't want that to ruin the experience of many, many weekends together with friends and family and drinks and dinners and food and road trips. Like, that whole thing shouldn't be sullied or defined by the fact that you didn't beat Dublin a couple of times.
Yeah, and even they speak about the connection with the players. So the reason the American guy Zoli comes back is because he's been able to get to know the players on his trips, whereas with Dublin maybe you can't do that. And it's just it's a real connection. It's a tribe as such. And as you say, they're not going to get carried away with and get downbeat because they don't win it, but they're enjoying being, I suppose, being in the hunt late into the championship.
In the mix, yeah. Rob Murphy, who hosts a podcast, the Mayo News podcast, he's making the point, like, there's 15,000 fans going to some of these more provincial games. He says there's no way there's 15,000 supporters going from just the county. They're people from all around the country. Like, half the country has Mayo relations, is the other thing, so there's a real lure of home about it all.
In the past All-Irelands, if you look at people, like the amount of people coming from Australia and America to go to an All-Ireland final with Mayo roots, and you'd love to see them get one at some stage.
imagine what you look at Laois last week and the celebrations, winning a qualifier game, and then if Mayo were eventually able to get over the line, it'd be phenomenal.
And they had 2 great chances sort of in the last 5 or 6 years that, when, especially the Donegal one, you just felt that, that was your chance.
In 2012.
Yeah, that was your chance.
2 years ago against Dublin was the first time I thought, my God, they're going to do it. I remember about 10, 12 minutes out from full time, almost saying, you need to actually get in gear here and realise this is about to happen, don't...
Was that when the sendings off, was it? Was that final? They've all kind of conflated into one big game.
Blended into one unbelievable game, but certainly, Mayo were dominating.
They were winning, they were ahead,
Yeah, and dominating, and they weren't hanging on, they were really on top, and then Dublin and just
it was the first time we'd really seen Cluxton's kickouts being rattled in the first half.
Yeah.
If you could just go back to Dublin for a second, Joe, I know it's not in the paper today, but you mentioned Diarmuid Connolly apparently back training with them.
Yeah.
I find that very hard to understand, because if what reading media reports was he was on his way to America but didn't get to go because of a visa complication.
Yeah.
But you're looking at Dublin, one of the most organised outfits in sport across amateur and professional. It's very hard to believe that, if he was in their plans and it was possible to help them win the All-Ireland, that they wouldn't have got this sorted out before.
Yes.
That you can't, it's a mistake with a visa, which means he's still in the country, and then eventually he could go on and play a role in the All-Ireland.
I agree with you. I find it hard.
It's bizarre. It's how come this wasn't sorted out? He's obviously an incredibly talented footballer. If Jim Gavin wanted him, why was he even ever going to America? And why wasn't he part of training since January or February? When you have all these other guys who were, unbelievably disciplined and diligent, and performing. You look at the bench. It's not as if you could say, they really need someone to come off the bench and turn the game. They look like they have that. So it's a fascinating story, and where it leads, I think, will be really interesting.
In your experience of team environments, will there be a bit of resentment there?
Yeah. I think there will be. Yeah, to be honest.
That's if that's how it's panned out. Because Dublin has such a cloak of secrecy around it, we don't actually know at what point he started training with them.
Exactly.
Maybe he's been on the periphery for quite some time and part of the group. There was a story went round a while back that one of the club matches that he was the only player wearing, and we don't even know if that's true, but he was the only player on the pitch wearing the GPS.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So I just find it hard to believe that Jim Gavin drops in an innocuous statement into a press conference that Diarmuid Connolly's back with it.
It did seem fairly concrete that his intention was to go to the States again and would have been there but for the visa issue.
Yeah, well, that's why
that much seemed kosher.
Yeah, just to clarify, I don't think there'll be resentment that he's training. The resentment could potentially come
if he starts next week.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe he wants the A's versus B's game to be more competitive, and
totally.
He plays a great role in that. But
for all we know, the team had a vote.
Yes, exactly.
We don't know.
Yeah.
Is there room for one? What's a twee word for him? Is there room for one maverick? Because I asked this because I was talking to one of your former teammates about Rocky Elsom.
Yeah.
And in that year where Elsom was basically man of the match in every game, he was a man apart.
Yeah.
He wouldn't even do the warm-ups the way you lads did the warm-ups.
No.
He wouldn't train the way you lads trained.
Yeah.
He was 100%, I'm doing it my way, and you just have to accommodate that.
Yeah.
And what your former teammate was saying to me was, it was just about okay with one maverick. If there was any more than that, it would have been anarchy. Is there? Can you accommodate?
There is room for one
genius.
There is room for one.
Coach.
But we wouldn't have been. Cheika would have been very protective of Rocky as well, and facilitated that. And that's all we only knew Cheika's leadership style, and he would have done that for other players to a certain extent a little bit. So, but from the outside, it looks like Jim is like everybody's equal. So that's where maybe it's different.
That's where the mantra. I mean, it is a more difficult one for Gavin to pass.
And
what he says.
Let's not forget, we were absolutely desperate to win a first European Cup. But would that work with the current Leinster team? Who, I don't know if it would. So, you can carry one for sure, but it depends on where you're at in your life cycle and what your mantra and your standards and your culture is. And listen, maybe Diarmuid is now, he's said to Jim Gavin, just give me one more chance. There'll never be any more issues, and he's taking a trust in that, and it's just a very interesting story in a team that are, if someone else brought someone like him back in, it'd be completely understandable, because that could be the difference between making All-Ireland final or not. But it just at the moment doesn't look like Dublin need him.
Yeah, but you have to remember that I'm pretty sure it's in that final that we were talking about earlier that Dublin were in trouble at half time.
Connolly came on.
Connolly had to be brought on, and I mean, he had cut. You used the word maverick. Remember, he wore a different gear to everybody else in the warm-up.
Yeah.
And it looked very obvious that he was not going to feature that day, and yet he was needed. And he was when he was needed, he was brought in, and it mightn't have fitted what we expect Gavin to do.
Yeah.
But the game had to be won, and he turned to him, and he did make the crucial contribution in that game.
There is at all times with all teams this difficult balance between everyone's equal, team ethos. You have to buy in, and then raw pragmatism.
Yeah,
he's the best player. I sort of need him on, and I know he skipped training 3 nights, and I know he might have been out in the beer, or I know he did this, or I know he did that. I'm not talking about Connolly here. I'm talking generally, where you just have to say, right, team ethos can take a backseat for today. On you go,
without a doubt. But it doesn't look like Dublin need that at the moment. But I agree with you.
Yeah.
You know, if they were in trouble, and I mean, having him on the bench is phenomenal. You know.
Yes, I saw somebody was referencing this morning that they felt that in the championship so far, but it hasn't really mattered. But that Dublin's bench hasn't had as telling an impact as in previous, that there hasn't been a couple of players coming through this year for the first time.
Well, maybe Gavin senses that, and obviously you can't bring him back the week before final, so maybe this is like about as late as you can manage to do it, but we'll see. There's 1 or 2 other GA pieces I want to get to. We'll take a short ad break. We'll check in with Tommy Welch as well, where it's Kilkenny 1-7, Cork 1-7. Tommy, 23 minutes gone, 1-7 apiece. Looks like a good game.
Yeah, it's a very open game, Joe. I suppose we spoke before the game about how Kilkenny needs to keep it tight and condensed. It's been anything but that. This open spaces in Croke Park here is phenomenal, especially inside in the tip or the Cork full forward line for Horgan and Cadigan inside, and the ball coming in is beautiful. The one lucky thing for Kilkenny is Cork, just another wide there from Patrick Horgan. They've hit a huge amount of wides. I suppose the story of the match so far, 1-7 to 1-7. Horgan scored the first point of the game, but then Harnedy, after 2 minutes, ball came in high across the field and won a penalty off of Paul Murphy, and Horgan duly dispatched it to the net. Then Murphy, Cork really could have took to the forefront then, only for Murphy made a great save from Alan Cadigan, and it was 1-1 to no score at that stage, so that would have put 7 points in it. Then Kilkenny came back, and as we said, if we could get space in front of Colin Fennelly, he could do damage. One ball went into him, turned Owen Cadigan straight into the back of the net. So it's been very kind of tit for tat up to now, and Cork definitely have huge amount of spaces, and I'll be a little bit worried about that. Now the Kilkenny half-back line are keeping their shape, so any long balls that are coming in kind of without the Cork defenders looking up, the boys are picking it up. So very even game, but I think Cork are on top only for the whites.
Okay, Tommy, thanks very much. A short break. We're back with John Greene and Bernard Jackman in just a second.
Off the ball on News Talk. News Talk wants to send you to the biggest gigs. Liam Gallagher, Jason Byrne, Bert Bacharach, and lots more. Find us on Instagram at News Talk FM for your chance to be there.
Satisfying afternoons with Harvey Norman. First-time buyer? Wondering how to get everything done? Don't. Just sit back and watch your house become a home with Harvey Norman's delivery and install.
Go, Harvey, go! When every smiling face and warm greeting reminds you why you come back. Summer after summer, year after year after year. When hands are shaken firmly, backs are slapped and glasses clinked. When old men swing their grandchildren onto their shoulders to give them a better view, just as they were themselves at that age. And when your horse is thundering to the line, only a nose in front, well, it's enough to make your hair stand on end. Celebrating 150 years of the Galway Races. Join us for a week of great racing. The Galway Races Summer Festival, Monday, July 29th to Sunday, August 4th.
Yeah, he was in the doghouse all night.
Yeah?
Well, no, he was in the car.
Oh.
Yeah, ran our battery down, listened to the radio like.
What?
Wouldn't start the next morning.
The radio?
No, the car. So first she throws him out.
Of the house?
No, the car. And then she rings post-insurance breakdown assist.
For the...
Well, for what else? For the car.
Life's unpredictable. Don't worry, we get it. Post-insurance car policies come with breakdown assistance you can rely on. Call us on 1890 222222 for a car insurance quote today. Post Insurance. Acceptance criteria, terms and conditions apply. One Direct Ireland Limited trading as Post Insurance is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. One Direct Ireland Limited is a wholly owned subsidiary of An Post.
Epic awaits. Sign up to Air Mobile today and get the new Samsung Galaxy S10e free with 40 gigs of data, free Air Sport Pack, plus unlimited calls and texts, all for just $44.99 a month. For more, call 1-800 500 300, go in store or visit air.ie. Air. Let's make possible. Plan prices for existing Air residential broadband customers for a 24-month mobile contract and a minimum 12-month recontract for broadband. Handset subject to availability. Air Sport Pack channel subject to change. For details, fair usage and terms, see air.ie.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Avantcard. Powered by MasterCard.
Now then, welcome back. We're reviewing the Sunday Papers. We have Bernard Jackman here and John Greene as well, as sports editor of the Sunday Independent. The latest from Croke Park, we just heard from Tommy Welch there. We'll go back to him in a moment. Kilkenny 1-9, Cork 2-8. A second goal for Cork. Meanwhile, in Ballybuffet, again, this one through in at 2 o'clock, so about 28 minutes gone. Donegal 1-6, Meath 5 points, the latest from Ballybuffet. We might check in with Tommy. Tommy, another goal?
Yes, John, huge amount of spaces again. The ball kind of broke down out around midfield. Dara Fitzgibbon, who has started midfield, many thought that he would start in the half-hour line after the Westmeath game last week. He has started midfield, won the ball, a kind of a break, a kind of a sloppy kind of a pass from one of the Kilkenny players, soloed straight through, drew out the Kilkenny defender, hand passed to Patrick Horgan. We spoke about Horgan before the game. We said he takes his points. He rifled to the top left-hand corner. A brilliant goal. 2-8 to 1-9. TJ Reid is standing over a free now to bring it back to a 1 point game again, but it's just up and down the field and it's going to be a score fest, Joe.
Thanks, Tommy. Now to page 5 of the Sunday Times. GAA should hold higher standards, says the headline on Michael Foley's piece. The singing on the Tyrone bus is something best left in the past. A nice story to start with from Mick Foley, I think. He talks about a dozen years ago, Northern Ireland were making a shape at reaching the Euros, and he was blessed with the title of Northern Ireland football correspondent for an autumn, and remembers a trip to Latvia. He says, I exercised due caution, keeping the accent quiet and minding my business, Mick, as I'm sure you all know, is from Cork, until a cross between Johnny Adair and Buster Bloodvessel took a seat beside me. Started asking me questions. Where was I from? He says, imagining the funeral in the coming week that would surely compare to Terence McSweeney, that other great patriot, I replied I was from Cork. Pause. Turns out Cork, though, was like a second home. Satanta Cup games between Linfield and Cork City had him down drinking in the bars, savouring the wit and charm of the locals around Turner's Cross. He was a Shankill roadman and a drummer in a marching band, tattooed with paramilitary crests and coming from the front line of an old war zone. And then he remembers they're getting on the flight, and they were amongst the last to board to Latvia, and the Billy Boys rendition was in full flight, excuse the pun. He says, I was just about up to my knees in Fenian blood when I heard an angry voice behind me, will you shut up, that boy there's from Cork. And there wasn't another note sung, out of respect to the Cork man on the plane. He said, that old story came back to me when the news broke, detailing the Tyrone team's impromptu rendition of Come Out Ye Blackened Hands when their team bus came upon an Orange Order march. Did any of you see the footage from the bus?
No, I didn't see it, no.
I decided to have a look at it this morning out of interest. So, for a start, it's playing on the bus, as in it's a recorded song, so they're singing along. A lot of them don't seem to know the words between verses. And if anything, this isn't a fist-thumping, primal rendition of this song. This is like laughing and kind of, it's all a bit of crack. It's not aggressive. It's, you know, it's like they saw the Alan Partridge episode a couple of months ago and think it's all just a bit of fun, just for context, because it might sound like they saw the Orange Order march and were, right, we'll show ye, head out the windows kind of stuff. There's almost an element, there's a real element of just gaiety to the whole thing, and almost, isn't this a bit silly that we're doing this? That was the atmosphere on the bus, in case you're wondering. And Mick goes on to talk about how really it's just a bit silly.
Yeah. Yeah, funny, I hadn't seen the footage and I'm not particularly interested in seeing it.
I wasn't either until this morning, yeah.
But that was how I imagined it. I didn't imagine that it was some kind of statement or piece of defiance, that it was a bunch of young fellas on a bus just being stupid.
Yeah. Most of whom can't remember the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah, but Mick kind of says it's sort of stuff that's rooted in age-old divisions and fundamentally laddish behaviour. You see, everything. It's difficult sometimes for us to fully understand it, but like everything over the border has different connotations when it gets into that kind of thing. And I just feel when you're coming home, you've had a good win in the Super 8, I presume Mickey Hart and the management team are up at the front of the bus and somebody just doesn't stand up and say, we were on a bus last week. I'm involved with Meath under 12 girls. So you can imagine what that's like, going on a bus down to Portlaoise to a blitz, singing songs from people I've never even heard of. And at one stage they got really stupid and just somebody said, look, I think they actually used the phrase that Mickey used, will you pipe down there, will you? Just cop on. And how somebody doesn't just get up and say, look. And he goes on then, and really interesting stuff about Auchnacloy, which is town a lot of us know because it was a crossing point. And the moves that the GA club there has made to kind of not just be a representative of one side of the community, but to try and straddle the whole community. So even in that context, it was an unfortunate. You've been more used to this than either myself or Joe, being on a bus, and you're going to see that sort of stuff. But there comes a point, surely, where a leader gets up and says, "Look, lads, cut it out."
Interestingly, on Auchnacloy, the Orange Order parade in question was delayed until after Saturday evening mass, and even waited for the parish priest to emerge.
It gives it the thumbs up. It's a great image.
Isn't it brilliant?
Yeah.
Priest comes out and nods to them to march past. Their music, says Mick, wasn't of the blood-curdling variety, but leaned more towards hymns and old airs. So, look, if people are going to have to march forever and a day, then at least that's the way it should be done.
And you're saying that on the other side of it, there was no
vitriol.
It's just...
And that's kind of the interesting thing then, because Mick writes the reaction amongst the community, GA community, since the weekend and this video emerged has ranged from embarrassment for Tyrone GA to outrage at a non-story, that this is not a story, it's just lads being silly and maybe not fully appreciating just how silly they're being.
I'd say that's it, to be honest. And how did it get out? Someone... How did
it had to be someone on the bus.
No, but again...
I presume someone on the bus took it and WhatsApped it to their mates saying, ha, look at this.
But I am probably not even aware of the context of it. I think it's definitely maybe misinformed and a lack of understanding and education and as you say,
But there would be senior figures on the bus who would be well aware of it.
Back to the question, to me, if something is inappropriate, it's up to somebody on the bus to stop it. You know what I mean? And then it stops dead. Yeah. The sheep will stop pretty quickly. You know what I mean?
I would imagine one word from Mickey Hart would be,
And maybe he stopped. Maybe it was stopped after the video, and that's why the video was sent saying, look, we shouldn't be doing this. It was inappropriate. We were stopped.
It has for this generation. I remember Ken Early speaking about this really well a couple of months ago. It was after the Michael Conlon fight in New York, where he comes out to music and you've got hundreds of lads in their 20s drinking beers and it's ooh-ah up the rah. And for that generation it's almost become a jovial thing, a fun thing, and there's a misunderstanding of the connotations here. It's both a long time ago and not that long ago, and almost there maybe needs to be a moment of everybody saying, well, just hang on, this isn't that funny. Maybe when you were 11 on the bus, we're all on a bus and you sing stupid songs and you don't even know what ooh out the ram means. But there probably is a point where we should be let's just park this now.
I'm just, at the moment, I'm just reading Donald McRae's book about
the boxing
book about boxing in Belfast during the Troubles. And it's principally focused around Jerry Story and the various boxers that he worked with in the 70s and 80s particularly. And I'm only very early into it, 80 or 90 pages into it, but Story has repeatedly talked already about how he viewed boxing and sport as being non-sectarian, non-political, and that everything that it did was down the middle. And he was at a time when Belfast was, being destroyed. Jerry Story could drive from the Falls Road to the Shankill Road, unhassled, unharmed by anybody, because he was Jerry Story and he was going to coach boxing kids, and he was neither interested nor part of what was happening around him. And that's the wider story of this. And the GA would have obviously had a particular slant in the north, and it was a place of comfort for people who were nationalists at a time when they didn't have many places of comfort. But as Mick rightly points out now, we're past that, and the GAA is a wider thing. It needs to embrace all, both sides of the community there and further afield. So that sort of stuff, it's just, as you say, Joe, it's just sort of not funny anymore.
No, because there's a quote from a Protestant member of the club up there who, when this broke out, received messages from friends, and they were of a...
I told you so. Yeah.
Told you. The mask slipped.
He's been extolling the virtues of the GAA to his friends, and then one slip up, and it's told you so.
That's what they're really like. That's what's actually going on.
But that's probably, that's the hotbed of the environment that they're still living in there. I mean, it's still the legacy of all that's happened there.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes, like, even Bernard Driscoll's Shoulder to Shoulder documentary was on there during the week, and I hadn't seen it before. And there's some people who just aren't letting go at all. Like, it's very easy for us down here to say, oh, it's just like, it's in the past now, let it go. But like, for some, it's just still so raw.
Yeah. And
they're like, that wall's not coming down. Not on my watch. This kind of attitude is still very much up there. So
it's kind of touched on in a different way in another piece, which we might get to later on. Pádraig Harrington talking about, as a young amateur golfer, when he would go from the south up to play in competitions in the north and in Port. I didn't realise that he held the course record in Portrush until Rory took it off him. And he talks about that and about, the culture shock it used to be. And, in the early days of being afraid to go up there until he actually went up there and played in tournaments and see how good it was and how much they appreciated sport and golf there, and how welcome he was made feel.
Yeah. Bernard, the Republic of Ireland team would often in the 90s and beyond have thrown on some rebel songs in the bus. I presume the Irish rugby team didn't have Rory Best knocking on the rebel songs up the top of the bus.
No, it definitely wasn't part of that environment.
No.
But as playing for Connacht, as a Connacht player going up to, or a Leinster player going up to play in Ravenhill back, in the late 90s was, there was definitely a different edge there in an environment, and as a hooker going to get the ball from the sideline, you'd be told, what side of the fence they thought you lived on, and it was unique, and I thought with Driscoll's documentary, I made my kids watch it because I think it does give you a history lesson to a certain extent through sport,
sure.
A little bit, but. Yeah, it's. I think again, you can't. I think the GAA are doing huge work up north to bridge that divide, and I don't think we should let some idiotic behaviour on a bus. I suppose crystallise or define the majority of people there.
I know you can give this story that too much prominence as well. We've given it plenty, but it's a good piece.
But I think in fairness to Mick Foley, I think he's pitched it just right.
He has totally right. Like
it's not full of moralisation and condemnation. It's just making it's a good point, very simply made and not overdone.
Yeah, what happened on the Tyrone bus was the bravado stuff of the past. Leave it there. It's kind of how he signs off. So that's GAA. FAI, keeping people going. We'll come to your story on the front page of the Sunday Independent in a moment, John. Tommy Welch, half-time in Croke Park. What's the latest?
Yeah, so it's 2-10 to 1-11. Sorry, I was on to John Duggan here. We were just discussing the first half. We were just saying, Joe, it's a strange game. Like it's more like an atmosphere of nearly a league game or a challenge game. There's not much tension around. I suppose there is the early throw-in at 2 o'clock. And
what's the crowd like, Tommy?
It's a sizable enough crowd. Like the fact that the upper stand is open over there in the Cusack stand, it just shows there is a sizable crowd here, but I suppose it is sparse around. Like there is a lot of empty seats around, but I'm sure there is probably 30 or 40,000 here all the same. But it's just the actual atmosphere in there's not much tension around, Joe, and it's just played like a free scoring kind of a challenge game really for all the world. That's the way it feels like up here. Now it is hard until you get to probably semi-final and final stage to create an atmosphere in Croke Park, but you can be damn sure if the Wexford supporters were here and Wexford were involved, the tension would be huge. So yeah, that's the way it has been played, just to give you a feel of what it's like here in the ground itself. And even though it's only 2-10 to 1-11, there's huge amount of spaces and scoring chances. It's not a dour affair by any stretch of the imagination, and there will be plenty of goal chances because of the open spaces in front of the goal line. Generally enough, Cork kind of play two guys inside, and the Kilkenny backs kind of man mark as such until they go out past midfield, and then the half back line try and keep their shape. It's much a different game than when I was playing, Joe, where when defenders got the ball, you drove it. You didn't really look where you were going to hit it. But so it was more kind of easier to play that zonal type of a game. Towards in the current game, if you don't follow out a man and he's gone even 5 yards in front of you, they will play that sharp pass. So it is much more difficult. So yeah, it's very much an open game and plenty of goal chances for Cork. As I said there during one of the updates, Owen Murphy made a fabulous save from Alan Cadigan there in the first couple of minutes that would have stretched it out to a 7-point lead for Cork. He went straight through the middle, and you know, when a goalie say holds his hurl with the right hand on top, generally then you don't go to the side. Say the boss is at his left hand side, you don't go to the boss side when you're taking a shot, because they generally are able to save them, especially if they're head height. That's where the ball did go, and Owen Murphy did save. So I'm just looking at a replay of Dara Fitzgibbon's pass to Patrick Horgan. So that was the difference. When Horgan went to shoot, he went to the weak side of, we'll say, Owen Murphy, and straight into the top corner. So yeah, it's a great game. Just a few, I suppose, positional switches then. Cork have detailed Stephen MacDonald, the Glen Rovers man. He didn't play last year, but he's back in the frame this year. A great servant to Cork hurling, won a couple of county finals as well, was in the team that played in the 2013 All-Ireland final. So he's actually detailed to Mark T. Reid, and he's doing a fair job in fairness to him. Richie Hogan, I spoke about the matchups before it, how he'd be marking Mark Coleman. I was looking forward to that. Richie actually started in left corner, has scored 2 points, and you know, is doing okay with the supply that's coming into him. And Killian Buckley then, he was named at left wing back, number 7. Conor Fogarty was named in midfield. They did a switch right at the start of the game. In general then, the Cork forwards are just moving around the place. Top player for them, I would imagine, if you were to look at it, would be Seamus Harnedy. Again, he's the ultimate ball winner, so he's making a lot of things happen in the Cork attack.
Okay, lovely stuff, Tommy. Go grab a cup of coffee. Back with you.
Thanks,
for
Joe.
the second half. Tommy Welsh there at Croke Park. Cork leading Kilkenny by 2 points, 2-10 to Kilkenny's 1-11. Open Ballybuffet going along very nicely for Donegal. Half time they lead Meath by 5 points. Donegal 1-9, Meath 8 points is the latest I have for you. That second half must be underway. They must be a bit ahead for some reason up in Ballybuffet. Meath have scored, so 1-9 to 8 points. So what's that, a 4 point gap for Donegal? Second half just underway. Meath have scored an early point in the second half, so Donegal by 4 up in Ballybuffet. And over on centre court at Wimbledon, they are with serve in the first set. Djokovic against Federer, 4 games apiece, and Federer serving about to go 5-4 ahead. So with serve thus far on centre court. I'll get you an update on the cricket in a few moments' time. Back to the paper review. Bernard Jackman and John Greene here in studio. John, your story on the front page, and it's inside as well on page 9. McSharry warns FAI against rush reforms, and he's not the only one. Basically, the FAI, in his opinion and the opinion of others, are rushing through a whole raft of reforms, all of them basically, which came in this recommendation. I think there's 70 odd of them. And there is a sense amongst members of the Oireachtas that maybe we should just hang on a second here. Mark McSharry is the TD who's made this point. I think Pádraig Ó Céige has talked to you as well about the fact that there's no accounts going to be ready for the AGM on July 27th, which seems ludicrous given that the accounts, we're talking about accounts that are up to December 31st, and we're not going to have them present at the AGM in July. So hold your horses is the general feeling? Yeah,
look, I was just ringing around last week, and I spoke to a good few people, and obviously Mark McSharry and Pádraig Ó Céige went on the record, but I spoke to others as well. Right. And there's very much a sense that, when all the stuff blew up following the revelations in the Sunday Times initially about the 100,000 loan, and then about the credit card and stuff, that there was a problem here with the FAI. Several problems, one of which obviously was its governance and structures and board structures. Arising out of all the revelations and what came out since, 6 different, we'll call them what you will, they're different reviews, investigations, inquiries are in train. Some of them quite serious, obviously, like the Office for Director and Corporate Enforcement. We've got 1 report so far out of the 6, and that's the only one of them that's a quasi-internal review, in the sense that there were members of the FAI, current FAI structure, along with people from Sport Ireland who were put in, who looked at the governance of the association, and I think it was at 78 or so recommendations came out of that. And an EGM then, going through the rule book, an EGM was required to get them through so that some of those changes could be implemented, which on the face of it seems fine. Yeah. But the problem is that we have 5 other investigations, all of which are independent, all of which are outside the control of the FAI. which I don't know if we can say they've concluded, but they certainly haven't issued any reports or findings. So we're now expected to think that in making changes introduced by the one quasi-internal report, while 5 others looking at much more grave matters than simple things like, term limits of boards and gender and whether the chief executive is a member of the board and all this sort of stuff, all of which is important and all of which should have been long since in place. So we're rushing these through. And as Mark McSherry and Pádraig Ó Céadaigh and others have said to me in the last few days, they may all be obsolete in a few months because the findings, we don't know what's going to come back. We don't know what state their finances are in. But like all the speculation is that the financial situation isn't great. I don't think you need to be a genius to make at least that stipulation. It's a very serious matter for a public company, which is what the FAI ultimately is, even though it's in charge of running football in the country, not to have its accounts ready for the AGM.
Yeah, do you know, in some respects, that was my biggest takeaway from your piece. Like,
it's 7 months.
This is not good
These
enough.
aren't recent accounts. These are the accounts for 2018. So they've had 7 months to get these ready.
Pádraig Ó Céadaigh talks to you about that. He says it's highly unusual. He calls it a grave situation. I can't believe this actually is the case. Like, in light of everything, I cannot believe that this is the case. He says it's highly unusual if accounts are not ready for an AGM, especially if you were talking about accounts that are up to December 31st and the AGM is not for another 7 or 8 months. You definitely should have audited accounts. Why would you not have audited accounts ready and signed off? The obvious reason is you're not ready to have them signed off because there's something holding it back for some reason or other. I don't know what that reason is, and I don't want to be guessing. I don't know why they haven't signed off. It is very, very unusual. That is ridiculous. That's unacceptable. So
there's several different scenarios here. There may well be good reason. It's hard to think of what that might be at the moment, but it's possible the auditors aren't happy. Okay, that's one possibility. They aren't happy given everything that's happened, and that they're querying things. I don't really understand. Pádraig Ó Céadaigh does understand this. He's a successful businessman and he does understand this world. And he points out that even in that situation, you can present a set of accounts which are then qualified by the auditors to give some kind of a picture to Irish football where we're at. What is the story?
There has to be some transparency, or at least an effort at transparency.
That was my other thing I asked then was, well, is there a genuine commercial reason why they should not be open and transparent about this? And again, he couldn't think of one. Okay. That they could at least give a ballpark. Yeah. And of course, the other option they had open to them under company law is that they could have deferred the AGM for a couple of months. There's a time window in which it must be held, and they're well inside that time window, so they had a bit of time. And all of which brings us to what, the more I talked to people last week, the more I was getting a sense that there's a worry there, that there's almost a feeling that if we rush these through and get these changes in, that we can move on and that we can kind of forget about what's been happening for the last few months. And I don't think there's any way that can be the case. I just don't.
Well, it may be cynical, but it's absolutely my take on the situation. They got this initial report, 70 plus reforms, the cynical political strategy here, and we see this time and time again in various spheres. They know the other reports are not going to be good. Let's get our EGM. Like, there's lots of people not happy with all the reforms. The schoolboy leagues, they should have representation.
They may not even get the reforms through the EGM.
But I think their opinion, their take on it is, let's get these 70 reforms in at this EGM, force it over the line, and then when Mazars comes out and the other reports come out and they're not good, and Donald Conway and the boys have to do some interviews, what is the first thing they're going to say? They're going to say, well, look, obviously, since then, we've passed 78 reforms, we've done this, we've done that. That's what this is. And they're trying to pull the wool over everyone's eyes. There's no rush here.
No, there isn't. And that's exactly the point that's been made. And allied to all that, the idea that any existing board member would still be involved for one day longer than the AGM, even on an interim board, is crazy. I mean, the Olympic Council managed a complete reform with bringing in a whole new, changing its name and bringing in a whole new board and executive. So I think people are worried that, and then we'll have this festival of football taking place all across County Meath, and that's a good thing because the show does have to go on. But there's going to be kids there getting photo ops with Stephen Kenny and Mick McCarthy and others. And I mean, it's their futures that we're talking about here. And it is very, very grim. There's a lot of people who are very concerned about the financial situation and the fact that there's no accounts. And I think that's the one thing more than that is probably more pressing than anything else at the moment. What is the story? Like the UEFA have said that there's money there to help them through the situation, but that was again presented in a certain way. That's never been properly clarified, but we are to assume, and it's generally taken, that these are advance payments on monies that will be due in years to come. So all this is doing is kicking the can down the road even further.
Yeah. The RFU look like the best run organisation in the world by comparison, don't they?
Yeah, you had a very good quote earlier.
I stumbled across, I was researching something a couple of weeks ago, and some people might remember it. Bernard remembered him actually, Jack Booth, when he was the former GA president, and before that he was a Leinster Council chairman. And during one of the like soccer and GA were very firm enemies in the 90s when GA was a little bit on its back foot. Attendances were down a bit prior to the 91 series with Dublin and Meath, and soccer obviously was going through a golden age. And at one point, Jack Bootman was asked for something about, was he worried about the impact that the windfall for Irish soccer was going to have on the GA? And he said no. And then he paused, and then he said, but I would be worried if it was the IRFU getting that windfall.
Right. He had the sense that they would have their house in order and take advantage and press ahead.
Which is what subsequently happened with the IRFU when you see how rugby is run in this country. Sorry, Bernard.
No, that's absolutely. I think. Listen, I think from what we read in the Sunday papers today, the FAI are still very a long way from having the structures in place that we'd all have confidence in, and that's at national governing body level, but also from some of the other stories. I know we talk about a lot, but just the way players are treating clubs with absolute disrespect, and the power they have is crazy. And Griezmann signed a 5-year deal last summer with Atletico. He refuses to train, and engineers a move to Barcelona. The Arsenal captain refuses to go on tour. He'll get fined 2 weeks' wages, but I mean, obviously what's going to happen is he's going to be sold, and the benefit he's going to get financially far outweighs 2 weeks' wages. And you look at Pogba, I know they're saying there that maybe he's going to be one of the captains, but Roy Curtis has a story about his agent Mino Raiola. He earned 41 million from Pogba's last move to Old Trafford.
So why wouldn't you want him?
And he's moving him again, and it's incredible. The players are completely in running the show, and it's just loyalty, etc. is going out the window, and it's just not. And agents, and there's so much money going out of the game into places that aren't about developing and growing the game, which is the sad part.
And I mean, that's what's going to happen in Ireland now. I mean, this drain of money, that's only going to affect development and underage. They're the programs it's going to affect, the women in sport programs, the kids programs, the summer camps. This is where it will be felt.
Yeah, because the performance end will always be funded, because that's actually what's going to drive revenue in the future. It's completely, as you say, the other areas that need constant money.
And there's a certain, one of the things that came up when I was talking to people last week, there's a certain amount of apathy in the grassroots towards all of this and what's happening. And there was a roadshow last week, and they were going around trying to sell these reforms, Donal Conway and others from the FAI, and it's easy to see why there'd be an apathy, but at the same time, if the grassroots loses complete contact with the senior echelons of Irish football, then that's not good for anyone, because there's only one loser there, and that's the game of football itself.
It's true. We're going to take a pause for news headlines, and then we'll wrap up in the papers with John and Bernard. There's an interesting piece by Eamon Sweeney on the greyhound industry, and then lots of golf, as you might imagine. The Open is on the island this week, a surreal thing in many ways, and there's tons of coverage, various strands. We'll get to that after news headlines in just a second. They're back underway at Croke Park. Kilkenny made a great start, 2-11 to 2-10 against Cork. So Kilkenny, they were down by 2 at half-time. A quick goal means they're ahead by a point.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Avantcard, powered by MasterCard.
Avantcard Reward Plus Credit Card, Ireland's only credit card that gives you interest refunds on purchases. Info correct June 2019. Source ccpc.ie. Avantcard DAC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
I'm Adam Shah, and I'm living proof that the MBA from NCI can give you an edge in your career.
Prove to yourself what you can do with National College of Ireland's wide range of full and part-time courses. Come to our open evening on Thursday, July 18th from 5 to 7 p.m. in the IFSC. Call 1850 221 721 or visit ncirl.ie.
Bruce Betting, one of Ireland's leading bookmakers. With best odds guaranteed on UK and Irish horse racing, Bruce Betting has you covered. And with the Bruce Betting app, we're always giving you more. T's and C's apply. Bruce Betting, in-store, online and now on your phone. Over 18s, please gamble responsibly. See dunlewy.net.
Dishwashers, washing machines, tumble dryers. If it's got a plug and it goes in your kitchen or utility, then the chances are Appliances Delivered can deliver it nationwide. But it's not all about the fridge freezers, you know. Oh no, we also do the sexy stuff as well in our new technology section. Laptops and tablets, smartphones and smartwatches. In just a few clicks, you can order everything from an action camera to a smart home speaker. Even fitness trackers, which basically tell you how fit you are, but probably not in the way you were hoping. The new and improved technology section, now available at appliancesdelivered.ie.
Everyone shouts about how fast their broadband is.
We're fast, mega fast, stupid fast, almost too fast.
But what do they say about reliability? With Virgin Media, you get both. Ireland's fastest broadband network and 99.9% network reliability. Reliability at speed. See virginmedia.ie.
Terms and conditions apply. Ireland's fastest broadband network as awarded by Ookla. Network reliability. See virginmedia.ie/proof.
Summer is finally here with temperatures really heating up. But it may not last long. Are you ready to make the most of it? Get barbecue ready at Super Value with 3 for €10 on barbecue meats. Or pick up delicious salads, cold drinks and much more. So to make the most of the sunshine, it's got to be Super Value.
Across Ireland on 106 to 108 FM and at newstalk.com. This is Newstalk.
Good afternoon, I'm Tina Gates. 90% of homes in rent pressure zones across the country have failed to meet minimum housing standards. That's according to figures supplied to the Sunday Business Post by local authorities. Eilish Staunton reports.
Worst offenders were rental homes in Limerick City and County Council, Galway County Council and Louth County Council. None of the private rentals inspected passed the minimum housing standards. County Wicklow Homes fared the best. Of 588 homes to come under scrutiny, 56% met the standards. Minimum standards require landlords to meet requirements such as structural repair, sanitation, heating, light, safety of gas and electrical supplies and absence of damp and rot.
The leader of the Green Party says he's reasonably confident his party will do well in the next general election. Fresh from their local and European election successes, Eamon Ryan says the Irish people understand the urgency of acting on climate issues.
Can we as a country afford to continue to ignore the environmental challenges that we face? And I think the answer to that is no, and I think the Irish people know that. I think they listen to the scientists when they say we have 10 years to address these challenges. We have to start now. We will work with all parties to try and make that happen.
Drugs worth €130,000 have been seized following a Garda operation in County Kildare. Adrian Harman reports.
The detective unit at Leixlip Garda Station carried out the raid on a house in the Easton area as part of ongoing investigations into the sale and supply of drugs in the town. There they found cocaine, ecstasy and MDMA with an estimated street value of €130,000. No arrests have yet been made. Gardaí say that investigations are ongoing.
And Ireland will experience a partial lunar eclipse on Tuesday, 50 years to the day since the moon landing. Astronomy Ireland's David Moore says it's the best partial eclipse we'll see for years.
It will be over 2 years before we have another eclipse of the moon. It won't be as good as this one either. So we're telling people to make the most of this one, which nicely celebrates the Apollo moon landing.
That's it for now. All news updates are on our website. That's newstalk.com.
Newstalk weather.
Staying warm and dry with lots of sunshine and top temperatures of 20 to 25 degrees. Now you're up to date on Newstalk.
Off the ball. This is Newstalk.
Now welcome back. So we're going to wrap up in the papers this hour. We will then be over to Killarney where it's Mayo against Kerry in the Super 8. Let's go back to Tommy Welch at Croke Park. 43 minutes on the clock. It's been a good start to that second half for Kilkenny, Tommy.
Yes, and TJ Reid is just after putting over another free to make it a 3-point game. 2-14 to Kilkenny, 2-11 to Cork. Within a minute, Richie Hogan used all his experience. I could see it. The ball was around the 65-yard line on the Hogan stand here in Croke Park. They hit the ball kind of diagonally across to where Richie Hogan was kind of running in, but the full back for Cork and the full forward for Kenny were coming out, so there's going to be a bit of a kind of a tangle. Richie Hogan saw it at the last minute what was going to happen, stayed down, made his run inside behind the Cork defenders. The ball broke lovely, he took the chance, went through and buried it to the back of the net. So everything, pointed towards experience and
the
class.
Intelligence of Hogan.
Intelligence.
Yeah.
We always say that about the great players, and in any sport they seem to have that bit more time on the ball. So since then it's been free after free. Richie Hogan is really playing well. Richie Lahey, who has gone out to midfield. Walter Welch came on at half time in place of Killian Buckley, and that led to a positional switch of Richie Lahey to midfield. He's after thundering into the game. So it's 2-15 now, another score from Kilkenny, a 4-point game, and suddenly Kilkenny are starting to look the better team.
They sure are. Thanks, Tommy. 45 minutes on the clock, so Kilkenny by 4 there. In Ballybuffet, Meath have stemmed the tide somewhat because the scoreline now, Donegal 1-9, Meath 9 points. A low scoring second half. Donegal did lead by 5 at half time, but back to 3 points. And Donegal, by the look of things, might have only scored a point in that second half. So Donegal 1-9, Meath 9 points. Meanwhile, on centre court, they're into a tie-break. It's Federer against Djokovic. Djokovic is 3-1 up in the tie-break. Federer, though, has serve. We'll keep you up to date on that in the next couple of moments. I'll let you know who's taken that first serve. Federer has just gone 3-2 and now Djokovic serving. So Djokovic, slight advantage in the tie-break. First set, 6 games apiece, obviously, at centre court. And over at Lord's, they're off to have lunch now for the afternoon. New Zealand have set England a target of 242 to win. So that's an attainable enough target for England to win the World Cup. New Zealand have set a target of 242. They're off for lunch now. Sorry, Neil, what was that on Ballybuffet? You were shouting in my ear. Second half is only just underway. Okay, they're a bit delayed there in Ballybuffet. So, Meath trailing by 3 points against Donegal. Second half just underway. They're slightly behind in Ballybuffet this afternoon. Papers then, Bernard Jackman and John Greene here in studio. The Greyhounds, John, you were talking to Eamon Sweeney during the week and you wanted to put a different slant on the criticism of the greyhound industry, and it was something Eamon definitely was happy to do. He thinks it's been given a bit of a raw deal.
Well, I was away, I was out of the country, so I hadn't seen the documentary. I just was back for the reaction to it and some of the stuff around it, which sounded pretty grim. I think you saw the documentary.
Yeah. Extremely grim. Yeah. 6,000 or so greyhounds are killed a year because they're overbreeding by a huge figure, huge percentage. Well over 100%. They're overbreeding deliberately because obviously the standards are so high and you just need to overbreed in order to try and catch up with the best in the sport. So frankly, there are just too many greyhounds being bred deliberately in the country. A greyhound's lifespan on the track seems to be about 7 months, they were saying in the documentary. I hadn't realised that a career was that short. And so then, frankly, between the overbreeding and the brevity of the career, there are just thousands of greyhounds being killed every year. Others are ending up in China, which is not meant to happen, but it does happen. They're smuggled out of the country and end up in China. There was footage of a dog being boiled alive in China. The conditions over there are fairly horrific. Not our problem in a way, but sort of our problem. And then just the routine killing of greyhounds in different ways over here. There was footage of a greyhound being shot, but not fully killed, and the man who shot the greyhound was taking the leash off the dog who was still alive to give it back to the owner who was waiting in the Jeep 10 yards away, and they'd just seen it happen to the dog. So these dogs are being mistreated by certain quotients. It was very upsetting. It was terrible. The greyhound industry gets €17 million annually because it's classed as an agricultural pursuit as opposed to a sporting one.
Well, yeah, that's funny because it used to be, there's the Horse and Greyhound Fund, which is quite a substantial sum of money. Yeah. And I think I can't remember I think it's 80-20, is it? 80% goes to horse racing and 20% to greyhound racing. I could be wrong.
Yeah, well, the 17 million is what they're pulling in. When you think Sport Ireland gets 60 million for about 50, 60 odd sports who are lucky to get their million.
That money originally, up until not that long ago, that money used to come out of the sports budget.
Right, did it? Well, and regardless, it's taxpayers' money.
It's taxpayers' money, and the argument for, and I remember writing about it at the time, that it didn't make any sense for the money to come from a sports fund, because for Ireland, horses and greyhounds is an industry as much as anything else, and it's an agricultural industry. It's an agricultural pursuit. So there was that money was transferred, and it became the responsibility of the Department of Agriculture. That's a separate matter. As I said, I was away for the documentary, and I still haven't got to see it. It struck me reading the coverage of it, because I just happened, when I was younger, I knew some people who were involved in greyhounds, and I knew that Eamon's Uncle Ned had been involved as well. And I suppose Eamon's piece today is looking at it from a more personal point of view. It's not really about the industry, although he does touch on it, in that it's his belief that the sport is worth saving. Abuses need tackling, but greyhound sport is worth saving is the headline on it. And Eamon just gives a personal perspective on his own experience in his own family with greyhound racing, and how much passion they had for it. And it strikes me that with the documentary, that we could make a broader documentary about rural Ireland and about the treatment of a whole range of animals across the agricultural, hens, horses, cows. It's just so. I know you could make a point that it doesn't really get into the points that are made in the documentary, but that wasn't the purpose of the piece. That's been well covered. It was just, I felt that there was somebody that we have in the paper who can give a slightly different personal perspective on this story and on greyhound racing. And it's to do with something that Eamon touches on quite a lot in his columns, which is his rural Ireland, his love of rural Ireland and the pursuits of rural Ireland, and it was from that perspective that the piece is coming from. I don't necessarily think it's in praise of the sport or the industry, and I think it's well documented that the industry has a problem, not just about the stuff that came up in the documentary, but in terms of, there's long been talk of problem with drugs in the sport. I don't know if that was touched on in the documentary.
Massively. There was a vet who was saying that he gets dogs coming to them in terrible health, not even in old age, in the autumns of their lives, and they're just so pumped with EPO, their blood is like treacle, hormones non-stop, every kind of drug going.
So it's not even scientific, it's just been done in an ad hoc.
Well, funny enough, he was saying, actually, some of the knowledge was, he was almost in a begrudging way saying it's quite impressive, actually. So, like, some of the people who own greyhounds and are doping them have done it in a really impressive way, as in they've shot them full of X, but then they've countered some of the side effects of X with Y, and they've got the balance just right. And obviously the long-term health for the dog is horrific and the dog is suffering. But for the time of competing, they've really got the balance right. He was saying this isn't information you get on page 1 of Google. Like, they've actually gone to some depth here, and there's a bit of...
They've gone to page 2 and 3 and...
They've gone beyond. There's scientific expertise almost in the way they're going about it. Did you see the documentary, Bert?
Yeah, I saw the documentary, to be honest. I'm from a farming background, so I'm used to animals, but I was shocked by it, to be honest.
Were you shocked?
Yeah, I was. I knew there was obviously rumours about, drug abuse in greyhounds, and I knew that, obviously greyhounds aren't fast enough. They're not many of them are converted into pets.
Yeah.
But it was just, I think, and obviously, the documentary was very focused on the abuse and the wrongdoings. But my initial impression, having seen it, was it's going to be hard for the greyhound industry to survive. Like, it was that strong, and there's going to have to be massive reform if it's going to regain public confidence. And I absolutely, I agree that, rural Ireland has been a part of a lot of families' history for a long time and culturally, but what we saw in the documentary, it asks serious questions that need to be looked at and policed properly. Like, there seems to be legislation in terms of even transporting dogs to England, etc. But there's no one really keeping an eye on it, and that was some of the hidden stuff. And
certainly not in the way that livestock are moved around, and the level of transparency and paperwork that's involved. It doesn't seem to be the case.
And did you have greyhounds in your life growing up?
No, we didn't. But I would have gone to greyhound I would have gone to a greyhound race like everyone else. But I'm saying I'm not. I understand animals, and like we're in the cattle business, so beef, when it's ready to fit for slaughter, it goes to the factory. So so I'm not precious around life in terms of animals, but just it seemed to be a callousness and unnecessary levels of cruelness.
Yes.
The animal was very much kind of behind money.
Yes.
And that was the impression I had from it. But like I don't know. Like you said, the legislation seems to be there, but it just is now they're going to have to invest a lot of resources into policing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And regaining public confidence. Like it seems that a lot of the meetings are just there for the money they get from the betting.
Yeah, but if the sport dies, I suspect it will be more an economic.
Yes.
An economic reason for its dying. I think Eamon's point is that he believes that as a sport it's worth saving, but if that's the case, then as a sport it needs to travel a very long road. And I mean, this hasn't come up overnight. Stories around how greyhound racing has been run in the country even have been, featuring in Phoenix and whatever for years.
Yeah.
So, but like at the end of the day, falling attendances and those kind of things, that's what we'll do for it.
Because the piece is, like when he talks about his uncle Ned, who was a bachelor and loved his greyhound racing, I wish I cared as much about anything as he cared about greyhounds, and talked about how he'd feed them and look after them. He says Ned would have been horrified by the abuses in the recent programme, and I've no doubt he would have been. And he would have been equally horrified, though, he says, about the campaign since the programme to force the sport into extinction. Like he talks about when my kids visit their granny in Galway, they go to races along with me. It's one of the highlights of their year, which implies it happens about once a year. And looking at the documentary, the reality of greyhound racing now is less the likes of his Uncle Ned or the kids going to that one meeting a year in Galway. It is 8 a.m. at an empty track, simply and purely for the purposes of gambling in the Far East. Like, that's the reality of this industry. There's nothing romantic
Which of course
or
isn't
pleasant about it. No, it's entirely grim, and I appreciate that's just an experimental thing they're doing. But like, for a start, you have to look at the Greyhound board and say, well, do you have faith in this board that they will clean this up? And even if you look at how this whole documentary came about, people may not realise the board commissioned a report in 2017, paid €100,000 for the report. The report showed that over 6,000 greyhounds are just being killed or going missing, quote unquote, a year, because there's basically deliberate overbreeding going on.
Well, I was just looking it up. There was one guy quoted in a piece in the Irish Times after the article saying that he has several greyhounds who will be defined as gone missing, and he said they're in my back garden.
Right.
So
fair enough, but let's assume that if the report says 6,000, let's assume 5,000 to be safe. Like, the point is, the Greyhound board did not say, okay, we need to talk about this publicly, we need to get to the bottom of this. What happened was this report was kept away from public discourse. There was a Freedom of Information Act, I think RTE applied to get this report, and it was denied, commercially sensitive, blah, 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 blah. And eventually this report was leaked out, and that was how this whole thing happened. So they didn't come and say, well, we need to debate this, we need help with this, we need to talk about this. Their instinct was cover up. Let's cover up what's happening here. And that makes me deeply suspicious of their motivations here going forward. I don't know, look, Bernard, you grew up on a farm. We are the most ruthless species on the planet. We are top of the food chain.
Yeah.
I would not like, after eating my dinner last night, which was meat, to watch an hour-long documentary on how it got there. None of us would. You have to accommodate what's worth it and what's not worth it. You can't say what's happening in the greyhound industry is worth what's happening to these dogs.
No.
You just can't.
No, but, and again, I'm not saying that the industry should be gone, but given the fact that there's a lot of taxpayers' money going into it, given the fact that, animal cruelty is wrong, this needs to be this documentary needs to lead to a line being drawn in the sand, and whatever happens from here is all about creating a sport and an industry that's sustainable and is run correctly. And that's the biggest issue: is the lack of governance, or the poor governance and poor implementation of regulations, which has led to this. And as you say, it looks like the Greyhound board turned a blind eye to it, and that's not good enough. It needs to just change.
It's I'm not drawing parallels, but when stuff started to come out about the FAI earlier this year, the public tap was turned off.
Yeah,
and that's something that tends to focus minds.
On the documentary, though, Eamon does make the point, there's a bit of opportunism going around, and that people wanted to get rid of the industry for a long time, and now they see, the moment is ripe. The outcry will enable them to do that. But he says, let's be honest, they didn't see the documentary, and they suddenly decide, eureka, greyhound racing must go. A lot of people did see the documentary. I'm sorry, I
think he harks on to this quite a lot, and I think he's possibly referencing kind of the social media, the noise that sometimes comes around these things on social media. It's something that he references quite a lot.
Yeah, maybe. Just certain aspects of the rural culture die out, don't they? Is that not a fair point? In 200 years, will there still be greyhound racing? Will horse racing have changed dramatically? It may well have. There'll be lots of sports in 200 years that won't be around.
Yeah, but also,
if you read Paul Rice's book about sport in Ireland, all the bull rings around the country.
Yeah,
but also 30, 40 years ago, we weren't producing, I don't think, 6,000 greyhounds, were we?
Extra every year. That's a really good question.
So I think the industry's already changing, and that's probably highlighted the case for the reason why there's more malpractice.
Yeah, okay. Well, in fairness, it's good to get the counter view. He does argue the Uncle Neds of his world don't get to voice their thoughts on it all. That's the point.
I think it's okay to be a little bit wistful sometimes about things that we enjoyed, and that we have our own experiences of.
Yeah, that's on the back page of the Sunday Independent if you want to have a look at that. Just to finish up then, there's loads of golf. Dermot Gillespie kind of sets the tone, John, in his piece by trying to almost put the scale of what's about to happen this week on the island of Ireland into some kind of context.
Yeah, well, Dermot's view is that it's we've had the Ryder Cup here, but Dermot's view is that this is the largest golfing event that the country has ever hosted, and he's got two quite lengthy pieces looking ahead today. I mean, across all the papers,
there's loads.
There's really good stuff. There's a very good piece in the Mail about the relationship with Ricky Elliott, who's Kipka's caddy, and Graham McDowell. They're friends since they were kids. Very good Pádraig Harrington interview covering a lot of stuff in the Observer, which would be good to touch on, because he talks about the Open as being coming to Portrush as being the start of something, that it doesn't necessarily have to always be in England or in Scotland, and he sees it going further and going out to Australia and places like that.
I've never heard anyone say that before. Trust Harrington.
Trust Harrington to come up with some original lines of thought.
So his logic is that the RNA represents 70-odd million people. It's called the Open. It's not called the British Open anymore.
And PGA Tour, he says, represents a few thousand golfers, and he said that the amateur game is the true game in golf, but it has to pander to the pro game.
Yeah. So if the RNA jurisdiction is worldwide, then it's technically the Open could be anywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
It's hard to see it happen.
It's very hard to see it happen.
I think we've all experienced Pádraig. He's a visionary, and he thinks left field, and he's right more often than he is wrong.
No, listen, the Open at Royal Melbourne would be quite something.
Yeah,
it really would. Yeah. Okay.
But anyway, so the Portrush, the Open is coming to the island of Ireland. It is a huge thing. I was talking to you off air beforehand, coming so quickly after Lahinch, and I didn't get to go to Lahinch, but I know the course and I know the town quite well, and it just looked unbelievable. You were down there, so you've a better sense of it. It looked unbelievable. Yeah. And if we get anything like the weather we have today for Portrush, I think we're going to get the same.
Yeah.
And the boost for Irish golf and for golf will be immense. And the papers have really reacted. Today is really the start of the build-up to Sunday papers. So across all of them, you're getting a really good sense of how important this is. And obviously Dermot, as kind of the senior scribe in the golf world, brings a bit of gravitas in it. But I mean, I think across the papers they've all really risen to it and really grasped the enormity of it.
He kicks it off nicely, Dermot, by remembering it was a bleak autumn day in 2013 where some people from the RNA were in a buggy driving around Portrush. This was the year after the Irish Open was there. And when they returned a few hours later, one of them remarked, "You're not going to like this. We think we could do it, but it's going to involve 2 new holes." One of them was Peter Dawson, the chief executive, and the other was their chief architect, Martin Ebert, when they had a scout around. And Wilma Erskine, the general secretary manager there, who's in a few papers, kind of says, "We call that our eureka moment." And they did it, but that was kind of where the seeds were really sown, 2013. And before that, when George O'Grady and Killarney pulled Enda Kenny and said, "Would you have any objections if we took the Irish Open to the north?" "Absolutely not," was Kenny's immediate response, and that led to Portrush in 2012. So that's how it's all come across, really, which was a nice bit of background. I hadn't heard that story about the 2 lads on the boat.
Yeah, Dermot had I'd forgotten it. He told me it a few months ago.
Right.
So Dermot being Dermot, the introduction to today's piece had been brewing several months ago in his mind.
Yeah. Anything jump out at you, Bert?
Yeah, I liked the little piece by Paul Rowan in the Times, and it's something very small about that lady, Wilma Erskine, who's 35 years Club secretary. When she got the job, she got it because no one wanted, and she kind of understood a bit of finance, she said. And in that stage, they had a golfer, 1 American tree ball in the whole year in 85.
Yeah.
And now Americans ring up and it's what month and what year they can get in, and just what a week for her, to be there 35 years and be part of a huge transition and turnover, and getting the club on a financial on a good financial place, and handing it over and finishing her term with something like this is just fascinating. And there's people like her and in clubs all over the world who very rarely get any limelight, but dedicate their whole lives to bettering their place of work or enjoyment.
She's getting plenty, and she talks about those Americans coming in the 80s, and like they had it circled on the calendar, like Americans were coming to Northern Ireland in the 1980s. Whereas now it's just, I think the turnover is like 5 million. It's unbelievable. They pumped 17 million into Portrush town just for this event. I just wanted to mention Derek Lawrenson piece, because it was just a really good idea. If you know there's going to be loads of coverage of the Open and it's Portrush, and McIlroy's 61 there as a 16-year-old is going to come up. Derek Lawrenson did a really clever thing. He tracked down the bloke who played with McIlroy that day, which was a great idea. It's a Stephen Crowe, who now works in the family building business just outside Belfast. Still plays off scratch, naturally. He was 6 years older than McIlroy at the time, and he talks about the day and what it was like. And he was saying, like, it was a decent day weather-wise, so he was 2 under after 8. He said it was good, but nothing special. Then he birdied 9, eagled the 10th, birdied the 11th. By now I was starting to think, could he go low? And he says, by now word was running around the course like wildfire. The old 16th, now the 18th, emptied. All the competitors ran over to follow McIlroy. Gets to 17 in 2 shots, 2 putts for birdie, and then he says gets to 18 in 2, 30 foot away from the hole. I was sure he was just going to try and put it close, said Crowe, and then it dropped in, and the enormity of what he'd done began to sink in. Even now people ask me, did I ever play with Rory? So we end up talking about that day, and Lawrenson draws links with the Open in 2005 on at St Andrews, and word spreading that day that this 16-year-old kid had shot a 61, because Graham McDowell, I'm sure, like, everyone hears about the new kid coming through all the time. McDowell was like, yeah, I'd heard all about this great kid who played off +7, blah, blah, blah. Then I heard he shot 61 around that course, and I knew we were talking about something a bit nuts. So that's actually a really good piece on page 70 of the Mail.
It gives you really, because we've heard about this round of 61, but I think that gives you a really good sense of it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, how extraordinary a round it was.
There's a really good video going around on social media about it, actually.
Oh, is there?
Popped up on my LinkedIn on Friday, but it's about 6 minutes, and it's footage actually of it, and all put together, an interview with that guy he played with.
Right.
And it's just amazing. And you think now it's 5 years since he's won a major.
Yeah.
And can he get back on track this week?
I'm being told to wrap here because we've kind of gone way over as
Can I mention the Peter Alice piece?
Yes, do, yeah.
We all have a soft spot for Peter. He's
100%.
kind of a wonderful anachronism in the modern age, that he's 89. Just a little story about when he went over to Portrush with his brother Alec.
Yeah, in 51.
In 51, and Philip Quinn has done a lovely piece. Alice is, he's just, his voice is that wonderfully soothing voice that we have, and even at 89, he's still coming out with, he's not always going to be PC, but he's always going to be enjoyable. But so Philip tells us he started off with his 69, and he was with his brother Alec, and then went with Alec to a local dance hall in Portrush. And Alice takes up the story. We met a couple of lovely ladies. Doreen was her name. She was on holiday from Harpenden. We danced the night away, and I took 84 or something the next day. It was worth it.
He's great. He is great. 89, and he's going to be there working again.
That's an amazing stat from earlier. That he's
played with every Open winner since World War II.
Phenomenal.
Isn't it? Yeah, geez, he's. I saw him at Lahinch. He was in Lahinch at 89, sitting there, and he's unbelievable. Paul McGinley's writing, thrilled with Lahinch. Like a few people, is saying, not sure what's going on with Tiger, but something weird. He's only played in one tournament outside of the majors this whole year. Like, no one is expecting him to turn up to Portrush without playing any golf and do anything. So, I don't know. Who knows? Like, Tiger's retirement could happen at any moment, but there's something strange going on with Tiger. And there's plenty of bits in the golf. We've got to wrap this up. Unfortunately, we've gone over time. John Greene, sports editor of the Sunday Independent, thank you for coming in. Appreciate it. Bernard Jackman, thanks as ever. Appreciate it. We'll go to Tommy Walsh in a moment. Short break. Kilkenny lead by 2 points with a minute to go at Croke Park.
Join Off the Ball in Abu Dhabi this November 17th to 23rd for the inaugural Off the Ball Open. With flights from Dublin, 5 nights in a 4-star hotel, golf on 2 championship courses, gala awards dinner, Peter Lorry golf clinic, and a live Off the Ball roadshow. You can also hang out with some special guests, including Kevin Kilban and Kieran Donaghy. The inaugural Off the Ball Open. Book now at CassidyTravel.ie and check out offtheball.com.
Off the Ball on News Talk.